Your Royal Highness, I'm so delighted and honoured to be talking to you today on subjects of sustainability, your upcoming fashion projects, and your own sense of style. So I wanted to begin by asking you about your own commitment to sustainable fashion. Your mantra is buy once, buy well. Have you always taken this approach to your own wardrobe?
Well, I'm not sure, but I'm one of those people who hates throwing anything away or wasting anything. So I rather like trying to keep things as long as I possibly can. Hence, as long as I retain the same shape and can go on fitting into things, I'd rather have them repaired, you know what I mean, and maintained, and even patched if necessary, rather than have to abandon them. The difficulty is, as you get older, you tend to change shape, and it's not so easy to fit into the clothes. So that was one reason. But also, I am one of those people that can't bear waste. So whether it's food waste or any of these things, I'd much rather find another use.
Yeah.
Which is why I've been going on for so long about the need for a circular economy rather than a linear one where you just take, make, and throw away, which seems to me a tragedy in today's terms, because inevitably we overexploit natural resources, which are rapidly depleting, as you know.
And then where did the idea of the Modern Artisanal project come from, and why did it appeal to you?
I can't remember whether you were involved. It was about 2 years ago, was it, or 3 years ago, the British Fashion Week, and we went, my wife and I, to visit Yoox Net-a-Porter as part of the visit we had, and that was where I met Federico Marchetti,
I was there.
you remember, who I found very enjoyable, and talking to him all the time, going round his headquarters. I said to him at one point, you ought to come and see what we're doing at Dumfries House, because, we started a textile training project there in, high-end fashion skills and sewing skills and all the things that, as you know better than I, are in shorter and shorter supply because of the older generation beginning to come to the end of their working lives, but not enough attention has been paid, sadly, I've always felt, to the vocational skills and vocational education. So I was talking to him about it. He came up to Dumfries House, saw what we're doing, we talked further, and that was where the idea, to link Italian design students with the Politecnico Milano and students here in Scotland, between designing and making, came to the fore, and that's what we started it in order to try and achieve. And having that link with Italy is so critical anyway, I think.
Your Royal Highness, how important is it to you personally and to the UK to maintain, promote, and protect our fashion and textile skills?
Well, I think it's absolutely critical for obvious reasons, that in fact the British fashion sector and textile sector is of enormous importance. But the trouble is, it requires constant investment in young people and in the development of real skills. And I mean, you know better than I how much effort and dedication has to go into learning those skills, which again, I come back to my point about the need for vocational education, vocational training, which has been so lacking. And so we were told when we first came here, I first came to Dumfries House, that nobody was interested in anything like textiles or skills. And of course, when we contacted colleges and we got people together, it transpired that, of course, there was huge interest, as it turned out. So we developed, our atelier system. We're now doing more and more, if we can, in this whole area of building the traditional skills, which are so vital, whether it's embroidery or sewing or whatever, cutting, tailoring, all these things, which are in short supply. And so, of course, a lot of the students we produce here and help to train are snapped up by local firms, the ones that are left in the textile sector. But it seems to me there's huge opportunities, particularly now within the whole sustainable fashion sector, to counter this extraordinary trend of throwaway clothing.
Yes.
Or throw away everything, frankly.
It brings me to the question, how important is taking a sustainable approach to fashion sort of within the overall climate change agenda?
Well, I think again, it's absolutely vital, because apart from anything else, apart from the amount of money that is generated by the textile and clothing sector, fashion sector, what is it now, $1.9 trillion or something, and they're projecting up to 2030 something like $3.3 trillion. But at the same time, the whole clothing sector contributes something like 1.2 billion tons of greenhouse gas. So it is absolutely critical that we address this whole issue around how we produce all these clothes. And as you know better than I, so many of the processes is involved in textile making involve hazardous chemicals, toxic chemicals, processes that damage the environment in a huge way. Then there's all the waste and throwing away of clothes into landfill sites and goodness knows what else.
Yeah.
Which is why it matters so much if we're going to tackle these huge global challenges around global warming and climate change. So we have to decarbonize, but also improve the impact we make in terms of pollution on the world. And so there are interesting developments going on, as you know, in innovative materials. And for instance, the things that could be made, I know we had an interesting conversation I did with Vin and Omi, the two fashion characters I met at the Fashion Week in London, who have been making textiles out of nettles, which they collected at Highgrove. That turns out to be an ancient system of using nettles. So there are all sorts of other materials. They can now make a mixture of cotton and birch fiber. But the problem always is the processes involved in making these things. How do we reduce the impact they have on the environment and life generally?
So, tell me about your Sustainable Markets Council that you launched earlier this year.
Well, that's designed, hopefully, to try and tackle now the real issues about how do we develop the solutions which exist and which are under development but have never been brought really to the fore because it's always been considered uneconomic and nobody was really interested. But now suddenly, after years of trying in this area, nearly 40 years in my case, suddenly the interest has become enormous. At the last minute, it's almost too late. So we only have a very short window of opportunity to tackle each sector of the economy, to decarbonize those sectors. But we need to bring our ambitions forward, which is what I'm trying to do with the Sustainable Markets Initiative, from just net zero by 2050 to net zero by 2035. Because otherwise we will lose this battle completely. And now suddenly big investors, asset managers, companies are all now much keener to engage on these issues. So what we're trying to do is develop these sector round tables of companies from these different sectors of the economy, whether it's aviation, shipping, agriculture, whatever, to brainstorm and develop task forces and champions from industry. And we're getting a lot more buy-in than we would ever have done a year ago.
I've always admired the way you dress. So tell me about your sense of style. Where does it come from?
I thought I was like a stopped clock. I'm right twice every 24 hours. Anyway, people then come round after 25 years to dressing like I do. But no, I mean, I'm very glad you think it has style. I just
very much so.
I mind to a certain degree, I mind about detail and color and things like that, and color combinations. And I'm lucky because I can find marvelous people who are brilliant, makers of the things that I appreciate. And so because of that, I try to keep them going for longer.
Great. I mean, you wore a suit to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's wedding,
Yes.
and I think it dates back to 1984 by Anderson and Shepherd.
Yes.
I mean, did you ever consider wearing something new? And does that suit look as good today as it did then?
Well,
and have you done any repairs on it?
yeah, I've considered it, but in the case of that particular morning coat, I can get into it still just. So as long as I can go on getting into it, because I don't wear it every, you only wear it a few times in the year, in the summer. And so obviously you want to keep those sort of things going. But obviously, whereas I said earlier, if I can't fit into them, I just have to have something new made. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite how radically different they can be at my age.
Your Royal Highness, thank you so much.